Defense News. It's proudly sponsored by Navy Federal Credit Union. If you're a member of our nation's armed forces, the Department of Defense, or if your family is, we'd be proud to serve you too.
On this episode of Defense News Weekly, a conversation with Texas Congressman Pat Fallon on the challenges of staffing and retaining a lethal fighting force. He digs into issues like troops' quality of life, the recruiting struggle, and what the services need from the defense budget. Plus, we get a look at how soldiers are preparing for the fight of the future while deployed in Germany. Learn more about the Army's Transformation and Contact Initiative. Coming to you from the nation's capital, it's the latest in news and analysis from the Pentagon to the platoon, here on Defense News Weekly. Welcome back to Defense News Weekly. I'm Pat Hansen. A new administration has arrived in the White House, but that doesn't mean the military is facing a fresh slate of challenges. Recruiting, for example, is a long-standing cross-branch hurdle. And while every service reported having met their 2024 goals, some claim that leadership is intentionally setting easily attainable benchmarks. Even so, getting troops in the door is one thing, but offering the right quality of life benefits to retain a lethal fighting force is another. These are some of the issues on the mind of Texas Congressman Pat Fallon, the newly appointed chairman of the Military Personnel Subcommittee within the House Armed Services Committee. Military Times' Capitol Hill bureau chief, Leo Shane, recently sat down with Fallon to discuss how the services can address these problems. Here's some of their conversation.
Congressman, thank you for sitting down with us, and congratulations on becoming the chairman of the Military Personnel Subcommittee for the House Armed Services Committee. Wanted to talk to you about that and what you see as the priorities for this year. Obviously, last year, a lot of big personnel issues in the annual defense authorization bill. I saw a big pay raise for junior enlisted troops and a lot of focus on military families and quality of life. Will that continue this year? Is that something that you're going to be focused on, sort of building on that into the future?
Yeah, there's no doubt. I mean, if you want to look at the first two priorities we have is quality of life issues for all of our personnel, and also solving the recruiting crisis, because we have one. When it's year over year and you're not hitting your recruiting goals, that becomes a crisis. And we have to, we're seeing promising numbers since President Trump was elected in November. I hope that continues, because we have to, if we don't, our greatest resource in the military is our personnel, flat out. So we need to make sure we have great folks. So I think retention on the backside has helped a little bit, but that's not going to last forever. So we need to focus on those two things. And the quality of life recommendations were wonderful. I don't think our work's done there yet, and we need to continue.
So in terms of specifics on that, I know that housing stipends were one thing that, there was some correction made, but not as far as it could go. There's been some talk about expanding some of the family programs and everything. We're still without a budget for this year. The budget's going to be another fight. When you're looking at some of those priorities, how much wiggle room do you think you're going to have, especially considering the financial investment that last year's quality of life initiatives had? Do you think you'll still be able to do things like targeted pay bonuses or pay raises?
That's a great question. I think, and it's a fair one, I think the money will be there. When we pass CRs, I call them, they're called continuing resolutions. I call them China resolutions, because Beijing clicks their heels. We can't start a lot of programs we need to for defense. So we really do need to pass a budget. It's been far too long. And in that budget, I do think now that we have Republicans in control of both the House and Senate, and President Trump's made it a priority for the military to be projecting power and projecting strength. And in order to, again, solve the recruiting crisis, we need to focus more on quality as well. So that will help not only with retention, but also, I think, attracting people into serving. And when you have challenges like 77% of young people don't physically qualify to even serve, that's another existential crisis that we have to work with some of the other committees to look at how we improve just health overall for American adolescents.
Well, and I wanted to ask you about that, because the recruiting has been a big issue, not just because of the economics of it, but because, as you said, there's such a small pool that you can pull from in there. I know the president has said he wants to possibly grow the military, and that's something that the committee has been interested in. Is it realistic to have higher recruiting goals in the next few years, especially when the military is having trouble meeting the ones that have been set now?
We're going to find out to say to what degree is really just love of country. How does that focus? And focusing on projecting power, whether it's soft or hard power, and lethality in the military, and really letting the military do what they do best, and not inject social issues into the military and use it as an, kind of an experimental field. We'll find out what effect that has, because clearly I've heard from, I don't know if it's anecdotal or scientific, but from lots of people that didn't want their kids to go into the military because they felt it was too woke or et cetera. But now we're going to focus on, the core constituency of our military, and we need to we want all quarters to serve. But there are certainly, you can see it in the data, certain people are more apt to do to perform military service than others. And let's go where the grass is the greenest and mow that lawn, and then mow all the other lawns. But I think you start there and you move.
Trump's pick for the Army Secretary was testifying in his confirmation hearing recently and talked about some of the struggles with that, some of trying to figure out just how you balance the recruiting side and bring folks in. Any concern that some of these efforts could backfire, that with cutting some of these outreach programs, that it will look like you're trying to focus on some folks? Or is it just a matter of really, I guess, getting the message out there? It's one of the things he brought up in the hearing, is the idea of getting out the importance of serving, the importance of the Army. Again, as someone who's served, what is it, what kind of message do you think needs to get out there to bring those recruits?
And clearly a great soldier, airman, Marine, sailor, doesn't have a pigmentation. They don't have a gender. It's just about merit, and that's what we want to focus on. And we need access in the high schools. We need ROTC units to be allowed on all colleges. And there were some that, ROTC wasn't welcome. Okay, that's your choice if you're a private university, but you shouldn't be getting federal funding if you're going to make that choice. And as far as public, in the schools, if you're private, again, one thing, but if you're public, it should be, mandatory, and not just, doing the minimum. Let's say it's once a month and then they do the once a month. We need to up that, because if you get access to the young people and they realize what the military can do for them, you're going to get a lot more people to consider it. And then if a lot more people consider it, certainly by the numbers, you're going to get more people that actually sign up. One of the initiatives that we have in our office is we're going to say, if you're a dreamer, or even if you're a foreign national living in wherever, the Philippines, we have obviously Philippines were part of the United States for over half a century, and other unique relationships that we have with countries around the world. If you want to come as a foreign national and serve, you have to prove, you have to go through security check, you have to, prove proficiency in English, et cetera. But automatic citizenship after a set amount of time, let's say you serve 6 years honorably, it shouldn't be, and I believe the way the law reads now, you can then apply. Right. It should be automatic. And we want to pass legislation and have, I'm confident we can get it through the House and Senate, have President Trump sign that order. Because let's say you were a dreamer and you're here and you're American for all but, the paperwork, because you grew up here, your parents brought you when you were 2, you went to American schools. Well, if you want citizenship, you can earn it. Yep. Serve in the military for 6 years, serve the country that has, treated you so well, and then you're a full-on citizen. I love that idea. I mean, that goes way back to Roman times. Now, granted, you had to serve a lot longer back then, 18 years, 24 years, depending on what era, but that's something that should have been done a long time ago, and we're going to remedy that.
And I know that's been an idea. The issue has come up that there were folks who served, but then didn't have that automatic citizenship in there. So, do you see any potential problems with that, though? That is, bringing in some more immigration, or do you think that just the trade-off with the military service will be enough to convince folks to say, okay,
you've earned it at that point. Particularly what you're doing is we're providing you a program and a pathway, and it's legal, and you're saying, I would love to do that. And then we say, okay, we need you. And then you serve. Now, it has to be successful service. It has to be honorable. And then when you hit that, I think we're going to write the bill, I think it's 6 years. Then you're an automatic citizen of the United States. And think about how amazing that would be to attend that kind of a ceremony. When you have that, whether it's a lieutenant or a sergeant or, I don't know the Navy ranks too as well, the ensigns and such. But that'd be really something great. And we need good people. And so I think this is one of the ways to do it.
When we come back, more from our discussion with Congressman Pat Fallon. Hear his insights for what's needed in the next defense budget. That and more when we return. Welcome back. Recruiting, maintaining, and deploying an effective military comes at a lofty price. Most recently, that price was set at about $850 billion. Still, some lawmakers are calling for an even larger investment in the U.S.'s defense needs to keep pace with rivals like China and North Korea. In more from our Capitol Hill interview, Congressman Pat Fallon detailed how the military should approach assembling a budget.
Let me shift just back to the military family side, because we've been talking a little bit more about the service member side, but I know the committee has been very focused on finding ways to help families increase childcare, increase some healthcare access. Do you see any areas that we haven't covered so far here that you think are some low-hanging fruit, some things you can be able to do to reach out to the family? Because I know the committee has talked about the importance of not just making this an attractive lifestyle for the service member, but also recruiting the entire family into the military.
I think that's a great way to look at it too, not just the person, but the recruiting the family. And when you recruit, let's say, an older sibling, that younger sibling's far more apt to serve than just somebody, random off the street. One of the things that Chairman Rogers really encouraged all of his subcommittee chairs to do is take a lot of CODELs and trips and going, seeing, and that's what we're planning on doing, is going to a lot of the military installations and asking the very people that we want to serve, because you're going to get the best answers from them. And if you ask enough of them, it does become scientific, is what do you need? What could we do better? What would make it more apt for you to re-enlist? And I want to get those answers directly from those folks and over a set amount of time, and then go back to Chairman Rogers and say, these are the things that we really want to focus on.
Okay, so that'll be the trip out there. When you come back here, you got to have the funding fight. You got to figure out whether or not there's the money for it. So what do you think is going to be happening with the defense budget this year? Do you think you'll be successful in pushing for more? I know the Republicans on the committee for several years now have been talking about, just this, you're either falling behind or just barely keeping up with the threats that are out there. Do you have confidence that there will be more money for some of these quality of life, for the equipment, procurement, for all the other things? Do you think there's going to be a good investment in the coming year?
The budget for the military is very unique in so much as you really need to look at what you should have for a secure nation and then fund it. Whereas everything else, you should be looking at, what are the available dollars and then what can we do? Because if you're not safe, then you're not free. And you've got China, rising China. They are pending, if they're not already a superpower, they're about to be, depending on your definition. And they're increasing their military budget by 7% annually. We weren't even keeping up with inflation under Joe Biden. And we need to look at those threats. And it's not just that. Then there's the asymmetrical threats of Islamic fundamental terrorism. You've got North Korea, nuclear North Korea, potential nuclear Iran. And you've got China being ever aggressive as well. And Xi Jinping has consolidated power more so than any Chinese leader since Mao. And that's very alarming because one man rule can go south very quickly. And I say to folks very often, name me the one long-term war that was fought between two democracies on opposite sides. It's never happened because people wouldn't put up with it. It's always dictator versus dictator, authoritarian versus authoritarian, or authoritarian versus democracy. So that's there's a lot to be said for our way of doing business as opposed to theirs.
Okay. So we've got the NDA annual work that's coming up on that. When should we expect to start to see hearings on that? And what do you think the first few are going to be for your subcommittee?
We're going to, our subcommittee, we really want to focus on recruiting out of the gate and to talk about that and see what the numbers are and look at different ways in which maybe to advertise and attract, and that access, going back to that access as well. The Marines always hit their goals. They're the smallest service, but they're the Marines. They do have the best commercials. I don't think that's a coincidence. So look at that and asking the Marines how they're doing it. You can learn a lot. You don't need to reinvent the wheel. And then as far as committees, the committee handling NDA, I would think that we're going to start up this, if not this month, certainly by March.
Okay. And then NDA will be done when?
On time. It always is. I think, Chairman Rogers was saying, he wanted to move it up. This is even last year. He wanted to move it up to, a month or two. So we could see, I don't want to speak out of hand, but we're definitely going to see, I think, sooner this year than we did last year.
Okay, great. Congressman, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
I appreciate it.
It was fun. Cheers. God bless.
When we return, our financial expert is back with advice on how to avoid rookie credit mistakes. Welcome back to Defense News Weekly. So, you're ready to make that big purchase you've been after, and all you'll need to make it happen is 1 or 2, maybe 3 credit cards. And if you can't pay them this month, there's always next month, right? Not so fast there, soldier. In this edition of Money Minute, Jeanette Mack from Navy Federal Credit Union has tips on how to avoid rookie mistakes when managing your credit.
Ever heard the saying, you need credit to get credit? When you're just starting to build your credit, it might feel like that, but the real deal is building credit, though it takes time and discipline, it can be faster and easier when you avoid these rookie mistakes. Mistake 1, thinking credit and credit cards are one size fits all. You've got to find the right one for you. Look for low to no annual fees and a low interest rate to save money. Or find one that gives you perks or rewards for the things you do or buy most often, like gas or groceries. Mistake 2, not using a secured credit card to establish credit. A secured card makes it easier and faster to build up your credit history and boost your credit score. Mistake 3, not maintaining healthy spending and repaying habits. Once you find your credit card, use it wisely. Buy only what you can afford to pay back and never max out your credit cards. Pay on time every time and check your free credit report with the credit bureaus annually. And don't forget, paying other bills like rent or insurance regularly can also help establish your credit history. So you don't just need credit to get credit. All you need is a little patience, avoid the mistakes, and you will get the credit you deserve.
Thanks, Jeanette. We'll see you next week. To get more coverage of military and defense topics, grab your rucksack and trek towards militarytimes.com and defensenews.com for more headlines. And to be the smartest airman in the Stratofortress, sign up for our early bird brief, compiled each morning, bringing you the most recent headlines. Lastly, if social media is where you collect open source intelligence, follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and X. And if you get your news by endlessly scrolling with your thumb, we're on TikTok, so go find us there as well. When we come back, a look at how the Army is furthering its Transformation in Contact initiative by sending soldiers to the wintry weather of Germany. Don't go away. Welcome back to Defense News Weekly. I'm Pat Hansen. The Army of late has been laser focused on its Transformation in Contact, or TIC, initiative, a move aimed at preparing soldiers for the fight of the future, utilizing all of the new gear, tactics, and structure that come along with it. Currently, there are 3 brigades testing out this method, one of them being the 3rd Brigade Combat Team, 10th Mountain Division. Those soldiers, traditionally based at Fort Johnson, Louisiana, are currently in Germany, representing the first TIC unit to go overseas or operate in the cold weather. Our very own Todd South joined us to recap what they've been up to across the pond. Take it away, Todd.
So the Army has a problem. It has to transform its formations for modern combat in various regions of the world, all while still having those same brigades ready to deploy at a moment's notice for current operations and current threats. One of the ways they're getting around that, or getting through it really, is Transformation in Contact brigades, also called TIC or TIC brigades. So the Chief of Staff of the Army and a select group of generals selected 3 different brigades, one in Hawaii with the 25th Infantry Division, one out of Fort Campbell, Kentucky, which has the 101st Airborne Division, and one out of Fort Johnson, and also split up to Fort Drum, New York, Fort Johnson, Louisiana, is the 3rd Brigade of the 10th Mountain Division. Those 3 brigades have been equipped with a whole new series of equipment, a whole new bits of gear, new drones, new detection software, small Raspberry Pi devices to create their own software, search functions, algorithms, ways to identify targets. They've been given a lot of new kit and new gear that they're experimenting with. Now, Army times, military times, we got to accompany the 101st down to JRTC earlier this year and see one of the first Transformation in Contact brigades go through its paces. They did extended air assault all the way from Fort Campbell with most of the brigade down to the location for the training site, came right in and started doing their OP4, used a lot of squad vehicles to get a lot of mobility out of everything and really move the force quickly to a point of need and attack and accomplish their mission. Now, they use a lot of different tools and methods to do that. At the same time, some elements of the 25th Infantry Division were experimenting with those same exact sets of tools and other types of tools more distinct to their region out of Hawaii, which is more of a jungle type of, an archipelago type of terrain. So they have to think more about water, they have to think more about heat and humidity, batteries operate differently there, different kind of equipment operates different there, optics are more sensitive in humidity and heat like that. So that's what the 25th Infantry Division had to do also earlier this past year in 2024. But recently, the Sergeant Major of the Army and the Chief of Staff of the Army both took a visit to Germany, where the 1st TIC Brigade out of the 3 is deploying overseas to test their gear and their equipment and their new tactics. They've come up with new types of strike companies, much like other units in these experiments have come up with strike brigades of their own called multifunctional reconnaissance companies, multifunctional reconnaissance team, an idea borrowed from the Ranger Regiment. They're out there in the mud, they're walking ahead of vehicles in the fog, even with advanced sensors to make sure that they're getting to their destination, not getting stuck, having to deal with the elements. That Sergeant Major Michael Weimer, a former Delta Force operator, longtime special operations enlisted man, he actually went out there in the OP-4, the opposition force gear, basically dressed all out like an enemy, attacking and probing enemy friendly lines, actually our friendly lines, the 3rd Brigade of the 10th Mountain Division. And he actually got to attack those folks. So I kind of wonder what it would be like to just be on your duty, on watch in the middle of the night, and all of a sudden the Sergeant Major of the Army is the one coming up to attack you. We got to talk with him a little bit about it. A lot of the stuff that the Sergeant Major had to talk about with us was about the fundamentals, basically making sure that NCOs knew their job, knew their basic skills, and all the newer soldiers knew how to do their jobs, stay protected from drones, and do these things in the elements. And not only the elements, over in Germany, of course, at the training area that they're at, much like the combat training centers here, all very realistic components, much of what they're pulling from the battlefield, lessons learned in Ukraine, lessons learned elsewhere in Europe, observations and lessons observed and lessons learned from Russian military tactics in Ukraine and elsewhere. Not only are doing realistic training in those training centers, also very nearby, just a country or two over, Ukraine is in an active war that we are observing, we are supporting, and we're seeing tactics from the Russians evolve, and we're testing those out with the U.S. Army and its partners in those training areas. Now, the 3rd Brigade, 10th Mountain Division is at the tip of that with new equipment, new gear. And they're not using the exact same stuff as the other brigades. They have to use different things in different regions. They have to adapt to that. They have to do this all on the fly while they're doing their regular training cycles, their regular deployment readiness, preparation and training, all the things that they have to do to be ready to deploy right now, but also fight a quote-unquote future fight that could happen in the near future where they might need new types of weapon systems, new types of approaches. So with the Sergeant Major visiting, with the Chief of Staff of the Army visiting, there's a lot of importance put on this brigade and these other brigades, but that's not the end of the transformation in contact. Transformation in contact is something they really are trying to instill throughout the entire Army and all of the combat arms brigades to begin with. Now, these 3 brigades were the first ones selected, but this is coming to a brigade near you soon, trust me. Basically, TIC 2.0 is going to push up to the division level. They want to get divisions experimenting with new types of technology, new types of approaches, which folds right into an approach called divisions in the dirt. Basically getting division headquarters and their ancillary brigades out into the training centers, live training in the field, not simulated, or combined simulated and live, in ways that they haven't done since before the 9/11 wars. Essentially, masses and masses of troops out, moving around the area, operating as they would in real combat. So the next level of the TIC brigades is TIC divisions, or TIC 2.0. And we should have more information about that coming this spring. The Army is continuing to bring in all these lessons learned from these 3 initial brigades, the TIC brigades that we've mentioned, and they're funneling back into their doctrine to kind of figure out how they're going to set up these different brigades across these different regions, what's going to work, what's not going to work, and continuing to transform, continuing to evolve those concepts as they move forward with the rest of the TIC divisions in TIC 2.0.
Well, that's all we have time for in this episode. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next week.